This is MSO News Sports. I'm Rick Moore, and happy once again to be doing From the Newsroom with Salem News reporters Dustin, Luca, and Paul Leighton. And as I was just saying, guys, so happy to see you again. Summer is sort of here. We had summer for a couple days this week. So how's everybody doing?
Doing great, Rick. Thanks. Good to be with you.
Very wet over here, but also great to be with you.
Yeah, it rains every day. Dustin, I want to start with you because there's an overlap here between Beverly and Salem. I know Salem is your primary coverage area. Beverly is Paul's primary coverage area. And you both got some stories about local assistance going elsewhere, which I think is a really important story to tell. So let's start with you and what's going on with Salem representatives helping out Ukraine, or area representatives, not just Salem.
Oh yeah, no. This was, and it was interesting because this is actually kind of dovetailing from Beverly doing exactly the same thing about 6 months ago. Paul covered it then. So basically, Beverly a while back sent or not even really that far back, they sent a basically decommissioned fire engine to Ukraine. Everybody autographed it. Salem did exactly the same thing this time around. So there were four vehicles that are still in Salem right now, but are about to be loaded up on flatbed trucks and sent to the port of Baltimore, where they're then going to go through a kind of protected, slightly secretive journey over to Europe, through Europe, and then into Ukraine. So what they're going to be providing is a pumper engine from Salem. I know that there's an ambulance involved. There's a couple of emergency vehicles, SUVs involved. And one of the really cool things that came together in the last couple of days on this one is that Wenham's fire chief had reached out to Salem and had said, "Hey, we have an extra SUV. Can you guys use it?" And so Wenham is now involved as well. All of these surrounding departments donated gear, masks, and something that's really important to understand. There's really, really tight restrictions that exist in the United States to try to protect firefighters and things like that. And one of the things that this causes is like if you get these SCBAs, these self-contained breathing apparatuses, they're only good for about 10 years, whether you use them or not. Even if you don't use them and they're in perfect condition, once they hit 10 years old, they're obsolete and they have to get rid of them. Most of the time, what they do is they actually drill a hole in them to make it so they can't be used anymore because there's a concern about their safety for some reason. And what they're doing instead of drilling holes in these masks and destroying them is they're actually sending 90 of them to Ukraine to help people in there. Or actually, no, I think it's closer to 60. But then there's 90 complete turnout gear suits. There's like
Wow.
25 helmets, like 50 sets of boots, and so it's basically they're sending these four vehicles. They stuffed them to the gills with gear to the point that every single window on all the doors of these vehicles yesterday had duct tape that said "Do not open," because if you open them, you're going to be covered in gear that's going to fall out. So
Wow.
I'm not sure how exactly they're going to deal with kind of customs on that one and saying, "Oh, you can't go in those trucks." We could be sending something to Ukraine, but this is a huge thing, and it's kind of being led by this organization called U.S. Ambulances for Ukraine that's been doing great work. Alan Dion, the fire chief in Salem, actually was with them in June toward the beginning of July and actually traveled as part of a convoy that was responsible for delivering the Beverly engine most recently. One of the things that he noted was that while they were driving, they actually came across one of the ambulances that were previously donated by U.S. Ambulances of Ukraine, having been sent to the front line, having been shot at by Russia, having been destroyed. So it kind of provided evidence on the ground in Ukraine of why these ambulances, why the SUVs, which are used as cover for the ambulances,
Mhm.
like there's all these different things that kind of go into it to try to just kind of help Ukraine defend itself from this conflict that now I think just recently hit the 500-day point.
You hear a lot of stories and a lot of rumors and a lot of political baloney among friends and maybe not so friends socially. But in getting this story, Dustin, do you find what is the reaction of those who are trying to help out? To me, it's a great sense, a source of pride I have in the community that would do that.
So it's a really interesting reaction. And that was kind of one of my favorite things about the story. I'm glad that you asked about this because he was actually over there, Al Dion, the chief in Salem, he had mentioned how when you encounter Ukrainian children who are seeing a fire truck and being like, "Oh, you want to go check out the fire truck?" It's exactly the same reaction as you see here in the United States. They freak out. They see the big vehicle. They want to get behind the big wheel. They want to climb inside of it. And it has Al found the exact same emotional response to the vehicles over there that you tend to see over here. When you're not seeing one of these trucks fly to an emergency, you see it spouting water all over kids or something like that. And that's kind of it's still, even though these vehicles are considered obsolete and they're no longer good to be used here in the United States, they're kind of being put to reuse and kind of living out their last glory days over in Ukraine, for a purpose that we would all like never criticize.
Great story. Great story. We go to Beverly and Paul Leighton, and a similar story, but a little closer to home, Paul, and local folk helping out elsewhere.
Yeah, there's a federal emergency management agency, FEMA search and rescue team based in Beverly that people may or may not be familiar with. And they 45 of those team members were among the people who responded to the flooding in Vermont the last couple of days. They went up on Monday and morning, and they worked overnight until 3 a.m, helping people get out of their homes and vehicles and searching, submerged vehicles to make sure there was nobody in them. So we've done quite a few stories on this team over the years, and they're one of 28 FEMA search and rescue teams in the country, and they're based right here in Beverly. They have a location next to Beverly Airport that it's kind of out of the way. It's behind locked gates most of the time. That's where they do all their training. So the team members a lot of them are, police, firefighters, there are doctors, people with various skills that would help in these types of emergencies. And they do their training up at the Beverly site. They have a big, rubble pile at the site where they can search, and they have, canine, handlers too. So that team, it's Massachusetts Task Force One. They responded to 9/11. They were one of the first teams to go down there. What was it? 2 years ago, they had a 20th anniversary, commemoration up at the FEMA site in Beverly about their response. And there's a little museum up there that has artifacts from 9/11 and the World Trade Center. So anyway, it was good to see, like Dustin was saying, with the response to Ukraine, there's a local response and a team that's ready. They help out, all around the country. Last year they went to Florida for hurricane. Which one was it? I forget which one. And they responded, and so they do a lot. And now they're responding in Vermont.
I got to ask you again, Paul. Same thing I asked Dustin. Anecdotally, over the years, when you talk to people who do this, what's the sense of why they do it, or is there a sense of pride, that kind of thing, or it's just who a person is? He just wants to help out and wants to put in the extra time, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I know last year I talked to one of the volunteers is Mike Collins, who's the public services director in Beverly. Known him for years just through covering the city, and he's like a busy guy. And I went up to cover the return of the team from Florida last year, and it was Mike Collins. I'm like, I didn't know you were on this team. He had just recently joined, and he has a lot of expertise. He's an engineer and can help out in that way. And he said, just like you might imagine, that he just felt like that he has an expertise, and there's this, the training is available right here in Beverly, and he just felt the need to help out. And the guy who runs it, this guy, Mark Foster, who's been doing it for years, he's in charge of the FEMA Beverly team. And when they had the 9/11 event 2 years ago, there were, police officers and firefighters from New York City came up here to, commemorate the local team's response. And Mark was friends with one of I think it was with a now retired, New York police officer. So they created these bonds, as you can imagine, when you're responding to the World Trade Center back in the day there. So it's just, people feel the need to help out. They're volunteers mostly. I think they do get paid a stipend when they're on the road to help out, when they're actually responding, but they're volunteers and they just want to help out.
I think it's another demonstration of how small the world is. We were all neighbors with one another, but that's my political statement for the day. Let's go to something I found interesting back in Salem was that Salem, the city is going to allow or will let veterans, armed services veterans, park for free. Do I have that right, Dustin?
Yeah, so and this is turning into a really interesting conversation because there was actually, it seems, a bit of an omission on it that is now kind of getting a little bit of attention around the city. So what the way this works is a number of veterans through the RMV, they can get like a special license plate, kind of like vanity plates that, have, some kind of insignia indicating what conflict that they served in or something like that. And there's all kinds of different veteran plates that are out there. Salem launched something. It was voted by the city council, and the mayor was very celebratory about it after that. Um, Eager to announce it, basically saying that veterans park free in Salem. So the idea is that any place you'd have to put a quarter into a machine, any place you'd have to use an app. Veterans who have the veteran plate do not have to do that anymore. They still have to adhere to all the other regulations. You can't park for more than 4 hours in certain places. If there's a sign that says you can't park here because it's resident only, the veterans plate doesn't get you past the resident only thing. And this is in place to protect, for Halloween and things like that. But one of the questions that came up, I actually had a couple people reach out to me and basically point out that there could be an inequity issue here when you think about all the veterans who are kind of facing harder times and can't afford the $60 upfront registration and the extra $100 every 2 years to maintain the veteran plate. It costs money to have this thing. And there are a number of veterans who, as we know from covering, the events that honor Korean War veterans and kind of some of the wars that did not go so well for the veterans that came back home. There were all these efforts to make sure that they were taken care of. A lot of them are in poverty. A lot of them are facing homelessness if they aren't homeless. And if you think about it from that perspective, those are veterans that are not able to actually participate in the free parking because they don't have the plate. So we had reached out to Kim Emmerling, the veteran service agent in Salem, and what he basically said was, that it's you need to have the plate to pay to not have to pay, but if there's any veterans that don't want to pay for parking, to reach out to his office and they're going to find a way to make it work. Joan Lovely has kind of been making some noise now, basically saying that there's a number of bills that are before the state that are looking to actually eliminate the fee for the veteran license plate so that any veteran can have access to it without having to pay. And there's all kinds of different conversations that are now taking place to basically see if there's a way to cover the veterans that are in poverty, which is, kind of a very big deal because there are a lot of veterans that are in poverty and a lot of them tend to not get noticed, partly because they don't want to get noticed. But it's something that happens, and the city is now working to kind of take care of it, even though they've already been working to take care of.
Right. Yeah. Well, you never know when you come up with an idea, you can't think of everything. What about the idea of like a beach parking sticker, a sticker on the windshield or something like that?
And that's kind of one of the things that I was thinking about, where if you can kind of demonstrate that you're a veteran or something like that. But that's obviously, as a reporter, that's, we're just here to kind of be the fly on the wall.
I know.
But I mean, I will tell you that, after I ended up writing the story and I got the quote that I got from Kim Emmerling, I reached out to a city councilor and said, hey, just so you know, this is something that, the veteran agent said this may be something worth looking into. And I know the councilor had mentioned that they're going to look into it. And then all this other conversation happened. So it's the city's working on it, but it was already a great program, already a great initiative, just with that one little tiny oversight that they're now taking care of.
Journalism 101, we can't be the story. I get
exactly.
Even though Paul has been a lot of the story in the variant cleanup thing there, and he's done a fantastic job with that. Paul, let's turn it over to a new restaurant in Beverly. Is it open now?
Yes. Yeah. The new restaurant on the waterfront in Beverly, which was a long time coming, Mission Boathouse. It actually opened in February. I've been writing about it lately because there were issues with parking, which is one of the concerns that people had raised from the beginning there. And the city is trying to add more parking spaces. They recently took a property down there, this restaurant is right at the foot of the Beverly-Salem Bridge on Water Street in Beverly, overlooking the harbor. It's a beautiful spot. It was in, McDonald's for years, and it was a closed McDonald's for years. It was sort of this almost not abandoned, but really, underutilized site. But anyway, there's a nice new restaurant there. But where do you park? The restaurant has a parking lot for 60 vehicles, and that's actually a public spot. Anybody can park there, not just restaurant customers. But the city recently bought the former Rowan's Fisheries site. They took it by eminent domain, knocked down the building and created parking there. There's all these little parking lots around there. So that's a concern. Those are tightly packed neighborhoods, the Goat Hill neighborhood and the Fish Flake Hill neighborhood down there. And so I've been covering that. That's an ongoing issue. And then there's another story I had today on, as part of the license that the restaurant got to be able to operate on the waterfront. They have to provide public access beyond going in and paying for a meal. And they recently filed their plan. There's a room on the ground floor that's available to anybody from the public, groups, or anyone that wants to use the space. You can rent it for free and have a meeting. It's small. It holds maybe 30 people, but I spoke to one of the city councilors, Todd Rotundo. He said, say the city's, harbor management authority, for instance, might be able to meet there, or maybe, any local group. But I think it's sort of unknown, and to be, honest, the restaurant hasn't, fully promoted this yet, but it is one of the requirements that they're supposed to have this room that's open to the public for free, and that's now open. So you can call up the restaurant and say, I want to use your room to hold a meeting, and that's available with a beautiful spot overlooking the harbor in Beverly.
Nice job getting that out there. All right, we go back to Salem, and other areas, I guess. What's the update on LifeBridge, if you would, please, Dustin?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on with LifeBridge, and this is kind of a project that has suddenly taken a lot of attention in the city. So basically, LifeBridge operates a shelter that has historically had 40 beds in it and was increased during the pandemic to about 50, though they don't always have the 50 open. It's just because 10 of them are kind of there as a kind of a cushion. But so LifeBridge operates a homeless shelter. They have a church building next door that they, run events out of. They've got a thrift store kind of around the corner on Margin Street. What they're looking to do is kind of overhaul the corner of Margin and I can't remember the other street that's right there. Probably should have looked it up before I started talking. But basically, what they're looking to do is tear down and rebuild the LifeBridge building, and then also add studio apartments for recently homeless people, kind of like studio apartments that are very, very heavily discounted rate to kind of help them get back on their feet and kind of in the right direction. That's supposed to be, I think it was 60 beds on that case. And then they're also looking at about 36 units of senior housing in the back, which would be reserved for kind of seniors that are frail, that need a lot of assistance at home, but they don't want to kind of live in a kind of a more extreme medical scenario or something like that. So LifeBridge has teamed up with Harbor Light Community Partners, which builds this kind of housing and has throughout the entire North Shore. They've got projects all over the place. And they're also looking at moving a park. There's a Chris Columbus Society there they're looking to move that's got a bar involved with it. And the neighborhood has kind of, at least a good heavy portion of the neighborhood's kind of melted down over this project, because it's moving a park, it's tearing down a historic asset. There's neighbors have had concerns and problems with homeless activity in the area. And this is something, there were actually quite a few problematic comments that came out of a roughly 2.5 hour meeting on this last week, where a lot of residents, and you would think that there would be nothing worse than homelessness, but a lot of residents were talking about how hard it is to live near homeless, homeless that then get mattresses underneath porches. They start finding needles on their property, human waste and kind of feces and things like that. So a lot of neighbors are basically setting up the torches and the pitchforks, because that's what they've been dealing with. And they're seeing an increase in that kind of, the number of units as being a correlative increase in the harassment that they face. So that is kind of now turned this project into a neighborhood versus LifeBridge kind of a thing, which has been really interesting. But at the same time, there are a number of neighbors to the project that are also saying, we think that this is an absolutely vital thing. It's a humane thing. And that was one comment. One resident said something, it's really hard living next to a homeless shelter. And then another one said, well, we'd rather live next to a homeless shelter because it teaches our child how to be a human being. It's to actually understand the needs of others and the kind of the battles that others face and how they need assistance from society and things like that. So this project has created a very intersectional conversation in Salem that is kind of lit a fire in a way that the Pioneer Village project has, that the Lee Ford Terrace project has. There's all these different things that, even though the city council backs away during the summer, they don't do as much work. They're still super busy with these things. And LifeBridge is kind of the latest example, but a very, very large example that's kind of dramatically come up in the last couple of weeks.
Great story. I have a feeling we're going to hear more and more stories like that
for several years
across the region. Yeah. My goodness. Paul, two letters that scare the bejeebers out of me are A and I. But you've got a story on that.
A&I, yeah, I'm here as your AI expert, Rick. So yeah. Uh, well, this came up because earlier this week I covered the grand reopening of the North Shore Career Center. This is it's the Career Center is located on Washington Street in Salem, right in the middle of downtown in Salem. It's been there for, I think, 23 years. And this is a place I think there are like 25 of them around the state that are operated by the state, funded by the state through Mass Hire. And it's a place you can go to find a job, to get help finding a job. It, connects, employers and people looking for work, but they fixed up their space. They opened it up. It's much more welcoming. And as part of the Grammy, the Secretary of Labor for the state was there to for the ribbon cutting, and the mayors of Salem and Lynn were there, and a lot of officials. But anyway, I thought one interesting feature, and I kind of focused on in my story, is they have an artificial intelligence program and set up with the goggles and the controls and so forth, where you can put these on, and it simulates what it's like to work, say, on a manufacturing floor. And the idea is for people who've never been to one, and you can actually go in and through AI and pick up a certain tool, and it really gets very specific, obviously, with AI and the technology. It feels like you're actually there. So that's just one new thing they're trying. They've actually used it in their North Shore Youth Career Center in Lynn. I spoke to the woman who runs that, and kids have been using it for quite a while. And anyway, the key thing is the unemployment rate is really low in Massachusetts. The employers are really looking for people to fill these jobs, and in a lot of cases in these manufacturing jobs and in the healthcare field, these employers will actually train you and pay to train you. So I would just say, and I've written stories about the North Shore Career Center. This is another, asset. I don't know how much people are aware of it, but if anybody is looking for a job, from young people to, people in mid-career and making career changes, walk in there, and I'll tell you, there's, pretty good jobs available, and employers will really, like I said, actually pay to train you. So it's a good place to go for help.
Well, we link to all of your stories, so that's great advice. Any final thoughts, Dustin or Paul? We'll go to Dustin. No, you're all set. Paul?
Have a lovely, hopefully cool next couple of weeks. I know it's supposed to rain again. Hopefully it doesn't get too
bad. Okay.
Well, I can give you a quick preview of what I'm working on today. It's this place in Beverly, a longtime breakfast spot. Steffi's Kitchen it's been family owned and operated for, I think, 25, 30 years, but they recently sold. So I'm doing a story on that, but they are going to remain as a breakfast spot, but it's kind of a nice local story on a popular local spot.